Welcome to another episode of R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I leave Augusta after a relaxing morning and make our way via the Brussels Highway through country with abundant grass trees, wineries, vineyards, cattle and plantations. We pass through the small towns of Curedale and Witchcliff, once timber towns, and Forest Grove National Park before arriving in Margaret River, a very touristy focused town. We stopped and had morning tea just outside of Margaret River before making our way to Coamara, or Cowtown, as it is sometimes called. My apologies if I didn't pronounce it correctly. We were amazed to see the life-size fiberglass Frisian cows and calves throughout the town, though we did not see them all. We did have a chuckle at the roast on the post. The town of Karamarup, set amongst picturesque rolling farmland, was established during the group settlement era of the 1920s and became a service centre for the emerging agricultural industry, predominantly dairying, with the railway station providing the lifeblood for the dispatch and receival of goods. Strolling the streets around town gave us an appreciation of how vibrant this community was, with numerous artistic enterprises, wonderful cafes and gourmet food outlets, bakeries, quirky gift and sweet shops, and local wines for sale. Such a welcoming little town. After lunch, we made our way back to Taunton Farmstay, just outside of Margaret River, where we enjoyed a peaceful afternoon watching the cycle of farm life, though it was a little on the windy side. Just right for windmills, some would say. The following day saw us make our way back to Margaret River to do some grocery shopping and collect the few items needed for the van before returning to Gidget for morning tea. Then we were off exploring again, this time to Quinnanup Beach. First we made our way towards Coramarup before turning off the Brussels Highway onto Harmon's Mill Road through dairy farming country, past the Margaret River Chocolate Company and a number of wineries and vineyards, and onto the Caves Road through some very interesting country. On arriving at Quinnanup Beach, we were nearly blown off our feet as we exited the boat, but the view was stunning. The beach is backed by dramatic dunes ascending the slopes to either side of Quinnanup Brook, and in places rising to about 70 metres and extending around 500 metres inland. Quinnanup Beach in part blocks the mouth of Quinnanup Brook, a small stream that flows in winter and early spring or after rains, that drains over the 10-metre high Quinnanup Falls before entering into the Indian Ocean. The beach extends to either side of the creek mouth, with continuous intertidal rock platforms fronting the beach, apart from the 80-metre wide open section in front of the usually blocked mouth. Waves break over reefs off the platforms, with deeper water off the open section, where a permanent rip runs out the channel. We spent quite some time watching the ocean before deciding to make our way along some of this section of the Cape to Cape Trail that would take us to the Quinnanup Falls. But knees were not our friend today, especially with the very sandy patches we had encountered at the beginning of the trail. We did make it to the top of the first rise before stopping to admire the view. The colours were stunning, with the granite boulders dotted throughout the coastal bushes against the wind-blown cliffs. We stood and listened to the numerous little birds in amongst the bushes before making our way back to the boat. We made our way back along Quinnanup Road to Caves Road and on towards Gracetown, but Rick surprised me with lunch at the Cheeky Monkey Brewery and Cidery. The grounds, with its scenic views overlooking the picturesque lake and vineyard, was relaxing, not to mention the delicious lunch capped off with an alcoholic ginger beer. A very nice surprise. Gracetown is a fairly recent settlement near Margaret River, having been settled in the late 1950s, being named in honour of the local heroine Grace Bussell, who was involved in rescuing the crews of the SS Georgette that sank off the coast in 1876. To this day, Gracetown is no stranger to tragedy and loss. On the 27th of September 1996, a landslide occurred at the bay when approximately 30 tons of rock and sand fell from a limestone cliff onto people situated below, who were spectators at a school surf carnival. Rainfall during the days preceding the landslide caused the limestone to absorb large amounts of water. 9 people were killed and a further 3 injured. Tragedy, though not as large, occurred again in 2004, 2010, and again in 2013, when surfers were attacked and killed by great white sharks, but the area still remains a popular surfing location. From magnificent natural locations to striking historical homesteads, our next rendezvous was with the Ellensbrook Historic Homestead, nestled in the Lewin Naturalist National Park, in the lee of one of the most spectacular coastal dunes of the rugged western-facing coastline and sheltered from winter storms. At Ellensbrook, just a quarter of a mile from the beach, stories of dispossession, opportunity, hard work, resilience, family, perseverance, and the changing ways of life are intertwined with its history. For thousands of years, the Wurundjeri people used Mokkadup as a summer camping ground, using the spring-fed brook and the Soak as a source of water. In 1857, Alfred and Ellen Bussell arrived with the Wurundjeri guide and their 3 daughters and decided that because of the fresh water and fertile soils, the area would be the perfect location for their home and ideal for farming beef and dairy cattle. Alfred began building Ellensbrook in 1857 with the help of local Wurundjeri people, ticket of leave convicts, and deserting sailors, from driftwood used as a ridge beam and rough bush poles, while paper barks were used to create a framework for the house, which was later sealed with a special type of plaster made out of crushed shell and burnt limestone from nearby dunes, which the Aboriginals helped to create. The homestead took several decades to complete, with new additions being built as needed. Alfred and Ellen lived at Ellensbrook until 1865. 3 of their 6 sons were buried in Ellen's peppermint grove, 2 having died as infants. In 1865, Alfred left the property with the management being taken over by their daughter Fanny, who managed the property from 1871 to 1877. A second daughter, Edith, started the Ellensbrook Farm Home for Aboriginal children at the property in 1899, which lasted for 17 years. Restrictions on females owning property meant that Alfred's daughters were unable to inherit the property following his death in 1882. However, Edith eventually succeeded in acquiring the freehold title to Ellensbrook, including 900 acres of land, by the late 1920s. The area surrounding Ellensbrook Homestead has archaeology dating back 12 to 17,000 years, sharing so much throughout both Aboriginal and European history over this period, including the Meekadarabi Falls, a short 30-minute return walk from the homestead, with its fascinating legend about the moss-covered waterfall and the small cave behind it. We were disappointed by the state of the falls, but have since learnt that they are no longer visible nor accessible due to safety risks and geological changes. We left Ellensbrook around mid-afternoon and made our way to the quaint coastal town of Trevely, where early settlers were attracted to the region seeking land with fresh water and nutrient-rich soils. But the coastal property was barren and regarded as useless land until 1952, when Terry Bryan, son of one of the early pioneers, sold land, now known as Trevely, to Geoffrey and Beryl Edwards, who opened a holiday resort. Trevely takes its name from the Trevely Monastery in Crete, where Geoffrey, then an Australian soldier, was given shelter by the monks during World War II. Later, in 1959, they subdivided their land, selling blocks to pay for telephone and electricity lines, and word spread about the quality of the waves in the region, and surfers began flocking to the area. In 1969, the Australian national surfing titles were introduced to Margaret River for the first time. Then, in 1976, Shane Gould, Olympic swimmer and gold medalist at the 1972 Olympic Games, settled in town and was one of the first female surfers to grace the waves at Surfers Point, while the annual Margaret River Surf Classic began in 1978. Now home to the Margaret River Pro, the longest running pro amateur surfing event in Western Australia at Surfers Point, with its large world class surf breaks. Deconstruction was happening in and around the area as the Margaret River Pro had just finished prior to our visit. The tiered grassy areas made viewing the crashing waves onto the clean, golden sand up close and personal. I was mesmerized by the relentless Indian Ocean trying to catch the windswept waves as they rolled on shore. We then ventured to the Margaret River mouth where it meets the Indian Ocean. Such an astonishing place for a landlubber like me, but the huge waves captivated and intrigued me. Here was a place where the topography moves depending on the river levels as they rise and fall with the movement of seasons and changes in the volumes of water flowing from the catchment some 60 kilometres upriver, with the banks expanding and contracting to shape the surrounding sandbanks and altering the course as it spills into the ocean. The river disappeared beneath the sand before it entered the ocean, and we were left to walk across the huge sandbar between the ocean and the river. On the riverside, the isolated waters had a calm, brackish quality that was at odds with the wild, salt, pounding waves that dumped on shore on the other side of the sandbar. They were literally coming ashore above my head. I first ventured to the wooden platform that offered great views of the river mouth, but once I gained enough courage, I ventured down to the sandbar where I could photograph the tops of the waves as they thumped on shore. It really was a phenomenal experience. To have the ocean crashing ashore above where I was standing was so eerie, but also fascinating. The river mouth certainly was a remarkable place. On leaving Margaret River, we stopped at Warcliffe Road Lookout to view the ruins of Warcliffe House, the home of Alfred and Ellen Bussell and family who moved there from Allensbrook. The homestead, built in the Victorian Georgian style between 1857 and 1865, was the centrepiece of a 24,000 hectare estate. The house had a shingle roof with 6 large imposing stone chimneys, limestone walls, wide verandas, jarrah floorboards and cellars. The limestone was quarried on the property and pit-sawn jarrah was used in the construction and was vastly different from Allensbrook Homestead on its 4 hectares. In 1888-89 the house was extensively renovated, but sadly was destroyed by bushfires in November 2011, with very little remaining of the original homestead. After the death of Alfred Bussell in 1882, the estate was left to John and Fred Bussell, with their sister Fanny managing it until John reached the age of 23 years. Fanny stayed on for approximately 7 years, but the estate was later broken up and sold out of the Bussell family. The day had been full of pioneering history and natural wonders of the region. It had been a truly remarkable day. We spent what was left of the afternoon back at Gidget, enjoying farm life. The following morning we returned to Margaret River to visit the information centre, but was captivated by the statue of the Zygomaturus trilobus, the closest extinct relative of the wombat, that roamed the forests and swamps in the area for millions of years before disappearing about 45,000 years ago. Fossils of this megafauna were found in Mammoth Cave, 13 kilometres southwest of Margaret River. Since the start of our adventures, we have seen some amazing megafauna fossils found in different parts of Australia. I find it so interesting that these huge creatures roamed across this continent for thousands of years. With a cool, windy start to the day, we made our way to Vasey, where we parked Gidget before making our way into Bustleton to Abbey Beach, with views of Geograph Bay, the Indian Ocean, and Bustleton Jetty. Stretching from Cape Naturalist in the west to the city of Bunbury in the north, Geograph Bay is renowned for its white sandy beaches with waters that are clear and shallow. The bay is protected from the rough seas of the Indian Ocean by Cape Naturalist The following day we went exploring Cape Naturalist, the northernmost point of the Lewin Naturalist Ridge, with our first stop at Cape Naturalist Lighthouse, that stands on a 100-metre bluff overlooking Geograph Bay. 20 metres high, the lighthouse was built in 1903, with limestone carted by bullock wagon from a quarry about a mile away. Cape Naturalist is one of the windiest places in Australia, with gusts of 146 kilometres per hour having been recorded. We visited the Lightkeepers Museum, housed in one of the original Lightkeepers' cottages built in 1904, that revealed the fascinating maritime history of the Cape region. With its tales of ships wrecked off the formidable coastline, the hardships of life as a lighthouse keeper, and the functions of this working lighthouse, it proved to be an interesting morning. The historical artefacts and interactive technology brought to life the isolation and resilience of the lighthouse keepers. From the lighthouse, we made our way to Shelley Cove, with about 100 metres of sandy beach, a large rock near the centre of the bay, and reefs and ledges surrounding two big rocks which have over time separated from a much larger rock formation. We had a good vantage point from Point Marchant to look up and see the spectacular eroded cliff face overlooking the bay. I finally pieced together why this area had so many French names. Although Australia was first mapped from the decks of seafaring boats, it was the French who explored, mapped, and named this area, even though the Wadandi had already names for the area. From Shelley Cove we made our way to Sugarloaf Rock, a gigantic granite rock emerging from the Indian Ocean, sculptured by the sea, often battered by treacherous seas, and is separated from the coast by a narrow channel of wild water. Sugarloaf Rock is the world's most southerly nesting site for the red-tailed tropic bird, the only regular breeding site outside the tropics. Surrounded by seas that are full of abundant marine life, the deep-sided Sugarloaf Rock provides a safe refuge from coastal predators. Our next stop was at Eagle Bay, with its stunning vivid turquoise water, bright green vegetation, and blazing red rocks, emphasizing the sweeping wide white sandy beach with its calm shallow waters. At Point Paquette, a strip of white sand peeked out against the red ochre rocks that tumbled out of the shrub and into the blue waters, while further along was Sail Rock, at one end of Millup Beach, with Castle Bay at the other. Millup Beach is surrounded by natural bushland and had a huge shady grassed area bordering the serene water and seaweed-strewn beach. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we continue through Yalungum to Canal Rocks. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.